Back again, and not a minute late. Get at me. I'm late for everything. I'm always late. Not today. Not today, everyone. I'm hoping there's some people getting in the chat. That'd make me feel very good. There should be at least a few of you, motherfuckers. Let's fucking add the Discord and let them know what's going on. One person watching thus far. We're getting there. Building those numbers one at a time. Okay? And you know, when I've got more likes than I do viewers, that means you really love me. Thinking about me when I'm not doing anything. You're out there. Doing your lives. There's a few things I've got to ask. A few things we've got to go over before I start a new book. Before I commit to anything. I have to talk to some people. I have to ask them some questions. Hey, Discord, I'm live. Hey, everyone, all of you. Do you like that when people at everyone in a Discord, or does it just fucking make you want to leave the Discord? This is the purpose of my Discord. This is why it exists. It's just true. I'm live, everyone. I could tell the Fediverse, but there's only 3 people over there. Me and 2 federal agents. And maybe you, today, maybe you'll make that decision. Let's retweet this. Let's just fucking retweet it. Make sure it shows up in everyone else's feed again. Again! Or was I? Do I have anybody watching it? 4 viewers? That might be enough to start figuring some shit out. Flame is here. Smoke weed every day. Ask me anything, bro. Hey, Flame. It was time to ask Flame questions on Saturday night. And where was he? Nowhere. Because there was a storm that blew up the transformer outside his house. The whole street caught fire. And 10 people died. That's fine. That's fine. Alright. So let's do this then. I don't care how many people are watching, but I still do have questions that I've got to go over with you. Do I keep this stupid music? Is this the music we go with for the rest of the next book? Do you want to listen to this fucking music for the next 12 hours of your fucking life? Or should I change the music? Should I go with this music? You feel it coming on? A little bit of cello. It's almost reminiscent of the old music I would use in like the first 10 videos. But that one sucked because it was only about like... It felt like it was about 15 minutes of music that would just repeat over and over again. And while I liked it a lot, no. And they started fucking giving me not copyright strikes. They were giving me restrictions so I couldn't monetize, which isn't that big of a deal. I don't anticipate monetizing. What I want is super chats, ultimately. But I like this cello. The cello always works for the dark music. This one I might have to turn up a little. Let me know if I got to turn it up or anything. It's supposed to be in the background. If it's too loud, I start to talk like an idiot. Which I do anyway. Let's skip ahead a little bit in it. Yeah, this one just needs to be a little louder, I think. Like that. That feels right. A little slower. Maybe a tad darker. A little less going on. Not as Indian. Maybe I should do different songs, but that's an issue. Because I run the risk of suddenly coming into a copyright strike, like out of fucking nowhere, if I use different songs on every stream. So I need to know in the chat if anybody has any opinions on any of this shit. Or if you're all just gonna sit on your fucking hands and not type to me at all. We're starting the new Agora II, Kundalini, by Robert Svoboda. This one I think is written, and we'll go through this. I'm going to go through this slowly because I don't think I'm going to get very far today. I want to take my time. We're going to go over the cover. It explains the cover. Maybe we'll look through some of the contents. We'll get into the acknowledgments, into maybe the preface or the introduction. I don't think we'll go further than that. But I want to wrap my head around this whole thing right now. What are you feeling? We've got no fucking opinion on the music. You guys are fucking busting my balls. This new music working, or should I fucking use the old shit? Maybe we'll just go with this today, and we'll see what the fuck happens. That way I don't need anything from any of you. Nothing. Just your undivided attention while I mispronounce Indian words. All right. You guys. New Boob Tube says, this sounds good. This music sounds good. Did you hear the old music? Let's go back to the old music real quick before I get going. Y'all heard a lot of this music. That's really the only issue as far as I can tell with this one. Let's skip ahead. This one's got some, like, Indian-sounding elements once in a while that the other one doesn't have. And I don't know. There's just not that much of this dark meditation music on YouTube, to be honest. The dancer at the bottom, S315, it's from some fucking movie. I have literally no idea. I searched GIFs for Kali because I knew I wouldn't find any GIFs for Sri Yantra. That one was a good one. It repeats. It's like, it looks like it's looping, as opposed to just like cutting off at the end and restarting. So I like that one. You like this one that's playing now, New Boob Tube? Alright. We'll stick to the OG for this one. I think this one's better, to be honest. It's got more going on, which could or could not be a bad thing. Turn it down a little bit. This one's a little louder. Fuck. 35. That's too low. There we are. Restart it so I have all the time in the world. Okay. This one's got a little sitar to bring things together. Puts you in fucking New Delhi or whatever the fuck. Kurkestra, or some shit. I drank coffee this morning. I, like, never drink caffeine because there was a time when I was drinking way too many energy drinks and my heart was doing weird shit. And I'm like, I should probably just give this up forever. I drank some coffee. Only like half a cup. Just to make sure I'm good to go. And my tolerance is so fucking low. It should be just right. Alright. Water. Let's take a gander at this new book. Here we have the image, I believe on the left you see the image of Shiva, the divine masculine, and on the right the image of Shakti, the divine feminine. The serpent necklace, always things like this. Bones, notice that. That is control over the animal, and it's not literal, and it is told in many stories as literal control over animals. But to you, to me, I don't think that's what that is. I think that's the animal lusts and desires within us, to control those at all times. To wear the skin of the tiger, to have its bones, to have the serpents coiled around our neck and around our wrists. You see the third eye in the middle of the forehead, the unseen eye. Kundalini, Agora II. Yeah, the series is Agora at the left hand of God, which I read already, Agora II, Kundalini, where we are, and Agora III, the Law of Karma, which I have the PDF for, so it's totally doable. $1993, this was published. What is that? Am I covering it up? What is that? Dedication. She, the Eternal One, is the supreme knowledge, the cause of freedom from delusion, and the cause of the bondage of manifestation. She indeed is sovereign over all sovereigns. Devi Mahatmya. I think that's a date. I don't know what that date is. Dedicated to the great goddess, the divine mother of the universe, the Kundalini Shakti. Here we have what seems to be the Star of David, printed in the United States of America. Some people say that's the real seal of the country, but really, this is a book with a lot of geometry. And we're going to see going forth. And these symbols, they're relatively universal. People know that the Star of David didn't even come to common use by Jews until, I don't know when exactly, but much later, like the Middle Ages type thing. Maybe after that. So these symbols have been found in many places, and when I look at Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism, I see a lot of Eastern mysticism in it, almost as if they had lifted it right from the East and brought it into their magical system. That's the notion I get when I see the Tree of Life in the Kabbalah. I get like images of the chakra system, say. And even the Kundalini, the serpent energy that rises up your spine. Like you could see that almost in the Tree of Life. We'll go much deeper into that, I'm sure. Mr. Murray is happy we're doing book 2. 315. Thanks for doing the first book. You are welcome. It only took me 2 years. 3 years? A long time. But I did it. I finished it. And I think now we're off to a much better format. And I'm excited. Table of contents. Don't want to go too crazy here. Agni, I think that's the fire within. Kundalini, it's the serpent energy. Preliminaries. We're going to get to some rituals. Siddhana, we are. There are the rituals. The mantras. The Tantra. Music. Immortals. Gurus and disciples. That's one of my favorite things. That's the last chapter. That's why I love books like this. Books like Autobiography of a Yogi. Many other books too. The interplay between the student and teacher. And that's something I didn't lack at all in my life, thank God. And that's why I guess I identify so much with it. In this book, we are going to find many illustrations, which is interesting. Many, what's the word I'm looking for? Like ritual setups for fires and things like that. I don't know what this stuff is. The siddhas. Acknowledgements. With thanks to Robert Beer, Tibetan iconographer and friend of the Dharma, for providing his exquisite artwork and indefatigable, I don't know what that means, support for the Agora volumes. Dr. Frederick M. Smith, for providing the terms and definitions in the glossary, which I'm sure I'm not even going to look at. Thanks, Fred. Inner Traditions International, for permission to redraw several of the Siddha illustrations from Masters of Enchantment by K. Dowman and Robert Beer. I guess who that is, yeah. Allied Publishers Limited, New Delhi, India, for permission to reproduce the Sadashiva painting, which graces the cover of this volume. About the cover. So let's take one more look at the cover, and then we're going to go to that. I want to make sure it's fresh in your minds. Too far. Too far. About the cover. Vimalananda explains the concept thusly from chapter 2. The purpose of Kundalini Yoga is to reunite Shiva and Shakti, to create the eternal form of Shiva, Sadashiva. Sadashiva's left side is female and right side is male. And I want to note, I think, and I don't know, I'm just kind of speculating while I go through this, hoping to learn more. The Sat prefix, it means eternal, I believe. Now I gotta look into that further, because that could be wrong. Sadashiva's left side is female and right side is male. The two principles have united, but have not merged. If they were to merge, that would be the end of the play, and that would be no fun at all. Sadashiva exists on the cosmic scale. In an individual, this deity is called Ardhana Rishvara, the Lord who is half female. In order to manifest Sadashiva, the Kundalini must be made to rise fully, because the highest manifestation of Shiva in the human being is in the head, the highest part of the body. This is these are concepts that a lot of people misuse these days. And we're talking about the Lord who is half female. Like, I'm sure there's someone with the political agenda out there trying to say, like, that this is, like, I don't know, some sort of LGBTQ whatever thing that's, like, found in these ancient texts. Like, without understanding that the principles, the male and the female, are in everybody and should be balanced in everybody. And to try to reflect that in your physical body and your physical surroundings, that is only an indication that someone is too attached to the physical world, the material manifestations of reality, and not what really matters. That makes us all one. In an ordinary person, Kundalini is asleep at the base of the spine, and so Shiva is bereft of Shakti. Such a person is not Shiva, but merely Shava, corpse. I look at everyone I meet as a skeleton, because that is what they are, until a person's Kundalini Shakti awakens and begins to dance on her Shiva. That person is as good as dead. Here we see another one of these diagrams, a yantra. I think I'll go over this. I'm not sure how this fits in exactly to everything I'm reading here, but the sacred Sri Yantra is the most well-known and fascinating of all yantras because of its intricate geometric harmony. It consists of 9 interlocking triangles. The union of 5 downward-pointing yoni triangles, Shakti, yoni I think meaning vagina, with 4 upward-pointing fire triangles, Shiva, representing the penis. And I'm adding these fucking sex things. I'm sure they're in there. And is also known as the Yava Yoni, 9 Yoni chakra. The configuration produces a pattern of 43 triangles, which represent the goddess Tripura Sundari, at the center, surrounded by her retinue of 42 deities. These triangles are arranged in a series of 5 chakras that house 1, 8, 10, 10, and 14 triangles progressively from the center outwards. This structure is enclosed by 2 concentric lotus circles of 8 and 16 petals, enclosed within a square bhupura, or ground plan, and it continues on 316. Agora 316, man, that's a funny shirt idea. Agora 316. Don't you let me forget that, chat. That is funny. Put that on a t-shirt. I'd buy that for $1. There's an easier way to do this. There we are. The Mahavidya goddess, Tripura Sundari, is also known as Sodasi, the divine 16-year-old goddess. She is of a beautiful red complexion with 4 arms holding a bow, noose, arrow, and trident hook. She sits astride the prone body of her white Shiva in a sexual union, supported by a throne whose 4 pedestals are the gods Brahma, Vishnu, Rudra, and Indra. This form of the Sri Yantra was worshipped for many decades by Talang Swami in the Annapurna or Annapurna, I'm not sure what that says, temple of Benares. Let's get to this. Let's get to the good stuff. Agora 316. I have to write that down before I do anything. That is just the best thing I've ever heard. Let's write this down. Oh, Jesus. You know what's funny? On my computer, my 6 key is stuck. Do you think that's a bad sign? So sometimes I'm typing and it's just like 666666666. Demons, I'm telling you. This is dark shit. It'll get to you. It'll get to you. You gotta jam a knife into your keyboard to pull up the key. Alright. Where were we? Forward. This is where we were. Love you too, Agartha Schizo. Forward. Agora, described in this volume as Super Tantra, is a path of devotion to the great mother goddess Kundalini, here manifesting with the name and image of the goddess Tara. This way is one of extraordinary extremes and intensities, even for Tantra, and its aim is nothing less than to destroy the human limitations of the practitioner so that he or she becomes a superhuman, in fact, a kind of deity. Agora II is the second volume of a trilogy describing and explicating this way as practiced by the Agori Vimalananda, and as recounted by his student, the Ayurvedic physician Robert Svoboda, who wrote the book. The result is certainly one of the most unusual works to be encountered in the whole wonder-filled literature of world religions. It is also a work very much of this time, shredding and trampling on universal and almost universal prohibitions. The Agori sets out to overcome human limitations by shattering internally every restraint, no matter how ancient or powerful the taboo, and also by creating a body-mind that is able to contain emotional, sensory, and other experiences, which would consume anyone not properly prepared. The Agori, as presented by Vimalananda, must literally and systematically create a body and subtle bodies with a nervous system and other systems able to explore levels of consciousness and to tolerate kinds and intensities of energies which would otherwise result in madness, terrible suffering, destruction of gross and subtle body-mind organs, and death. Crucial to avoiding those outcomes are access to the necessary esoteric teachings and trainings, and above all, to the goddess. As Vimalananda says again and again, in this present time the external forms of the spiritual disciplines are of much lesser importance than the inner work and, above all, the immediate and personal relationship to deity. It is possible to relate to the Great Mother Goddess in such a way that most of the requirements, temporal and material, of a spiritual discipline may be cast aside. However, what is dispensed within the way of formalities must be compensated for by duration and intensity of both practice and devotion. Much present-day ritual and ceremony can be understood as aids or even crutches of a kind for those who lack the courage, dedication, and devotion to proceed in unmediated interaction with deity. In speaking of intensities involved in such practice, here reference is to something going well beyond, for example, the Dionysiac element in religions as experienced in practice. Those intensities are almost always reserved for special occasions, limited in time, and experienced within the context of different kinds of protections. But the Agori, or similar figure, must always be willing to do without human supports of any kind, and to venture into the awful worlds of the non-human, supported only by activated latent potentials, and by confident belief that the Mother Goddess will guide and protect. Such a practitioner must be willing to venture into anything or nothing, knowing that in either case, a successful experience will bring further isolation from the human and immersion in realities from which there can be no turning back. We are indeed speaking here of a cosmic thrill seeker, at home in realms of either terror or rapture, an ultimate psychonaut who is also our most authentic contemporary saint. Despite the uniqueness and emphasis on inner work, there is in this book an enormous wealth of information of value to the student of Eastern spiritual disciplines. Often, even in a sentence or two, he will shed more significant light on profound states of consciousness or very complex stages of meditation than the reader is likely to find in whole volumes intended to illumine the same subjects. The book is of value to advanced practitioners of yoga and other paths of self-actualization, while, at the same time, it should be fascinating reading for anyone interested in the farther reaches of human experiences and human potentials. Let it be added that there is much in this volume and more in its predecessor that will be startling and shocking to almost all. How much is to be taken as objective truth, and how much is to be taken as subjective truth, often is unclear. Vimalananda makes it plain that this distinction is for him not one of great importance, and if he is going to make judgment in the matter, then subjective truth is doubtless of greater value. Vimalananda also belongs in the tradition of spiritual teachers who deliberately speak and behave in such a manner as to shock and often dismay the observer. Such teachers are to be found in many traditions. For our own time, the very saintly Fourth Way Master, G.I. Gurdjieff, is a wonderful example. I would like to read his books at some time too. I was actually thinking about doing that instead of this, but here I am. Agora calls to me. Taking a break, folks. Taking a break. I'm getting into it, too. When I read it, man, I feel those seething energies coursing through me. It's exhausting and it's exhilarating. There are other paths and ways which have strong similarities to Agora. Most notably, ones associated with Kundalini and the Great Mother Goddess in some other religions and esoteric traditions. I would particularly mention as examples the ancient and still enduring esoteric schools of the goddess Sekhmet in Egypt, the goddess Hera in Greece, the goddess Kapo in Hawaii, the goddess Kali in India. There are also others. Each of these powerful and authentic mystery traditions offers paths of equal intensity, equally demanding of dedication and devotion to the Great Mother. Each uncompromisingly requires that the subtle and gross body-mind systems of the person become transmuted into vehicles or instruments having experiential capacities which by any ordinary standards are superhuman. Only when this has been accomplished can there be that level of interaction with deity and other non-human beings which the higher work requires. Finally, I feel obliged to say that I do not know whether Vimalananda was an actual person. His name and other names in the book are said to be pseudonyms intended to prevent readers from being distracted by externals. We are told that Vimalananda died about 10 years ago, so that there is no question of searching him out, as many tried to do with another such mysterious character, the shaman Don Juan in the books of Carlos Castaneda. That's also some shit that I would love to read. I read the first book, and it was fantastic. In personal conversation with the author, he states that Vimalananda was indeed an actual person, and that the mystery surrounding his identity is mainly at the insistence of Vimalananda's own family. Considering the shock content of various of the teachings, that is quite understandable. Some may wish to pursue this matter further. Most will find it sufficient to benefit from the extraordinary contents of Agora II and its predecessor. As for myself, I take pleasure in writing this forward, even in the absence of any verifiable certainties about the Agori Vimalananda, and despite strong personal reservations concerning some of the practices described. What I do know from many years of first-hand experience is the immense power of the way of devotion to the Great Mother Goddess, and how, as this book sets forth, such a way it differs from those which are more dependent on human teachings, and such objectifications in the world as ceremonies and rituals. From my own experiential knowledge of the fifth way of the goddess Sekhmet, I recognize in what is here called Agora, another path that has been provided as a real and powerful means of unveiling truth and effecting transformation. Robert Masters, PhD, co-founder and director of research, the Foundation for Mind Research, He wrote some books that I would be interested in reading, to be honest. Introduction. The study of philosophy without a longing for liberation is like dressing up a corpse. Tripura Rahasya. I will never get any of these names right. Don't ever expect it, because I'm not going to. In earlier times, when esoteric knowledge was under jealous guard, a spiritual aspirant usually had to endure years of patient waiting before being taught. Now that information has become an article of commerce, all manner of secrets would seem to have become available to anyone who has the price of a book or tape. However, simply because secret doctrines can now be purchased and thus easily possessed does not mean they can be easily comprehended. Though words can be bought and sold, that living wisdom, which cannot be confined within words, must still be earned. Among the long-hidden arcana now being packaged for sale is the lore of Kundalini, the root from which all spiritual experiences sprout, and most of the writers who have tried to present to the world this living knowledge, which is the source of all knowledge, produce only dead words. As Heinrich Zimmer observed, the best things can't be told, the second best are misunderstood. Carl Jung, who many decades ago delivered a series of lectures on Kundalini, explains why. Therefore, the yoga way, or the yoga philosophy, has always been a secret, but not because people have kept it secret. For as soon as you keep a secret, it is already an open secret. You know about it, and other people know about it, and then it is no longer a secret. The real secrets are secrets because no one understands them. One cannot even talk about them. And of such a kind are the experiences of Kundalini Yoga. That tendency to keep things secret is merely a natural consequence when the experience is of such a peculiar kind that you had better not talk about it, for you would expose yourself to the greatest misunderstanding and misinterpretation. I identify with that a whole lot, and people talk about, like, how could these secret societies keep everything? If they're controlling the world, how could they keep it all secret? And it's like, it's not a secret. You're just too dumb to understand it. You just don't realize that you're walking by the symbols of them every goddamn day. I see things like that in this statement. But then it's also like those times when you're so fucking high in LSD and you're around your friends. You're like, I figured it out, man. I figured out the cosmic joke. I figured out the universe. And you sit there and you try to explain it. And like, even if everyone's on the same page and they all agree with you, you realize that you are talking insanity. And that doesn't mean you're wrong. It just means that you will never, never put what is ineffable into words. You will just not do it. The experiences of Kundalini Yoga are peculiar because Kundalini is the source of all your experiences. Kundalini is that indwelling energy which, by self-identifying with your opinions and character traits, accretes and preserves your identity. In Jung's words, how do I say it? Jung, I've heard it a million ways. According to the Tantric teaching, there is an urge to produce a personality, something that is centered and divided from other beings. It is what one would describe in Western philosophical terms as an urge or instinct toward individuation. The instinct of individuation is found everywhere in life, for there is no life on earth that is not individual. Individuation takes place only when you are conscious of it, but individuality is always there from the beginning of your existence. So long as the urge toward individuation is mainly directed toward benefiting your own limited, temporary individual self, it is called Ahamkara, or egoism, the force which makes it possible for you to unquestioningly accept the world as it is on the surface. This same force is called Kundalini when it turns away from the mundane and toward the spiritual, the permanent, and the eternal. After Kundalini awakes, it becomes impossible to continue believing that external reality is the sole reality. Ahamkara makes you who you are now. Kundalini makes you into what you will become. What you will become. Kundalini has remained secret for so long because, as Jung notes, it cannot be understood. It can only be experienced. The process of spiritual evolution cannot be objectified and separated from the subject who evolves, for Kundalini functions simultaneously as descriptive consciousness, as the thing described, and as its description. Since human language is made up of subjects and objects, descriptions of Kundalini tend to be skewed, either toward objective comment on the experience, which devitalizes it, or toward description of the raw subjective experience itself, which is usually distorted by the experiencer's mental imbalances, stresses, and fantasies. Among the writers who have made valuable contributions to the literature on Kundalini are Sir John Woodruff, also known as Arthur Avalon, an Englishman who was initiated into Tantra while serving as a judge in India, and Gopi Krishna, a Kashmiri Pandit who suffered terrifying consequences when his own Kundalini was awakened before he knew how to deal with it. While neither perfectly conveys Kundalini's incomprehensible secrets, since their words get in the way, here and there in inspired passages, Kundalini's radiance flashes momentarily through, like lightning through a somber sky. Every book that's been mentioned here have been things on my mind that I've been meaning to read, which is very interesting. I haven't read Agora II yet. I had already read the first one when I went through it. This time it's all new to me, and yeah, it's crazy how it's referencing all these books that I've thought about before. These accounts succeed, albeit partially, because their information has not been lifted out of context. Kundalini can be understood solely within the context of Indian culture. But ever since the time of the early Theosophists, most Western interpreters of Kundalini, unfortunately, in order to import their own systems of psychology concepts, which they believe to be tantric, have not hesitated to assign to tantric words denotations which often vary significantly from their original meanings. Jung himself borrowed concepts from Kundalini yoga, including the very concept of Kundalini, which he called the anima. And so he bears some of the blame for this situation. At least he was more forthright than are most distorters of Kundalini. Another quote from Jung. One needs a great deal of psychology in order to make these matters palatable to the Western mind, and unless we try hard and dare to commit many errors in assimilating it to our Western mentality, we simply get poisoned, for these symbols have a terribly clingy tendency. They catch the unconscious somehow and cling to us. But they are a foreign body in our system, corpus alienum, and they inhibit the natural growth and development of our own psychology. It is like a secondary growth or poison. Therefore, one has to make really heroic attempts to master these things, to stand up against these symbols, in order to deprive them of their influence. Perhaps you cannot fully realize what I say, but take it as a hypothesis. Though it is more than a hypothesis, it is a truth. I have seen too often how dangerous their influence may be. So, yeah, and that's another thing, is that like words will never do it. They can guide you there, but they will never be the thing. Just as like, I don't know. Just as like the word chair is not the chair I'm sitting on. They're two different things. My concept of a chair, your concept of a chair. We might be thinking of two different chairs, man. So it's not the chair. Just as when we talk about God, like it's not God. Rejecting those concepts that we do not need for a systematic psychological description of Western experiences with the unconscious, Jung rationalized. We can only understand their picture of the world in as much as we try to understand it in our own terms. Therefore, I make the attempt to approach it from the psychological point of view. I am sorry to have to bewilder you, but you will be more bewildered if you take these things literally. You had better not. If you think in these terms, you will build up an apparent Hindu system with the psychology of the Western mind, and you cannot do that. You simply poison yourself. And that's why when I try to think about and talk about these concepts, and it doesn't always work, man, it's because it's so hard to do. I try not to use Buddhist words, Hindu words, Christian words. I try to say it like a fucking normal asshole would. Because that's the closest you'll come. And like, I am not any religion. I am not of any specific creed. And like, that's a weakness to me spiritually sometimes, but at the same time, it's like, what am I going to do? I can't call myself a Hindu. They're going to say I'm not a Hindu. I can't call myself a Christian. They're going to say I'm not a Christian. Yet I believe in Jesus. Yet I believe in, I don't know, the Bhagavad Gita. It is what it is. Possibly those who try hard and dare to commit many errors in order to assimilate concepts from Kundalini yoga into popular psychology do avoid the fate of the many Westerners who have poisoned themselves by dressing their minds in Indian vestments. But while replicas of Kundalini yoga may function well enough in the external world of consensus reality to be useful psychological tools, they cannot substitute for the real thing when it comes to spiritual development. This is particularly true for those people who, by design or accident, have broken through some of the barriers which separate objective from subjective reality, and live lives in which waking reality and symbolic reality compete with one another for attention. Such individuals risk being trapped on an unknown ocean in a leaky conceptual boat if they try to rely on psychology alone to carry them safely to shore. I feel like, I don't know, a lot of people I know are sort of like that. Like, we broke our egos. When they talk about ego death on drugs, like we fucking did too many drugs accidentally, not realizing what we were doing to our minds. And now I walk around seeing like patterns and symbols everywhere, like a schizo. Hey, it happens. An awakening into the reality of the non-physical in a person who lacks adequate prior preparation usually precipitates a personal crisis. Such people may seem crazy, are often thought to be crazy, and sometimes believe themselves to be going crazy, all because they can no longer unquestioningly accept our standard reality. Most of those who lose touch with everyday reality are actually insane, of course, but in a sizable number of the cases, the cause is a spiritual crisis. Red Wing says in the chat, check out Robert Svoboda's YouTube channel. He has some really good videos. I find him kind of fucking boring outside of this often. Not so when he's talking about Vimalananda, when he's recounting like Vimalananda's gurus and that sort of thing. That's what I want to hear about. Vimalananda is the man of the occasion. He is my interest. And while I probably will, I'll check out more on your recommendation there because I've only seen a few. Yeah, I get more out of the character of Vimalananda, well, whether he ever existed or not. The prophet Ezekiel once heard a divine voice command him to sleep on his right side for 390 nights, and then to switch to his left side for 40 more. Unless you know, as yogis do, that the position in which you sleep exerts a profound effect on your physiology, and so your consciousness, you will agree with Time magazine that Ezekiel and Saint Teresa of Avila, who like Ezekiel heard voices, were schizophrenic, when in fact they were most likely inspired by a reality of which the unawakened know nothing. A spiritual awakening alters forever the way in which an individual experiences the world. For after the initial crisis abates, one discovers that there is no way to return to one's previously comfortable mindset. Once aroused and unboxed, Kundalini is not derousable. The genie will not fit back into the bottle. After the awakening, the devotee lives always at the mercy of Kundalini, says Pandit Gopi Krishna, who experienced several crises during which the speed, insouciance, I don't know what that word is, and authority of the power he had unleashed terrified him. That power, which caused his terror, which he had to face without the help of any guide, can terrify or incapacitate anyone who awakens Kundalini without proper guidance. #315 asks, how did you come about How did you come about book? This book that I'm reading now, Agora, that's a good question. It's a very good question. I was doing a lot of acid. There's the answer. It's probably the answer, to be honest. I don't know. There was a point in my life where I was buying like a book from Amazon every week, and I was trying to find the weirdest stuff I could possibly get. I was probably looking into like dark spirituality or left-hand path. That's probably how. I was looking into left-hand path stuff, and this is a major recommendation. When you look into left-hand path, like as a Westerner, you expect to find like the Book of Satan. I read all that crap. It's garbage. It's trash. There's nothing in it. It's stupid. It's basically just like, it's secular humanism, but also fuck you, mom and dad, because you made me go to church when I was a kid. It's really lame. But then this book is where it was at. This is how I really got into left-hand path stuff, I'd say. So long as Kundalini remains within the realm of psychology, our relative objectivity can shield us from the influence of symbolic existence. Once we enter subjective reality, however, that realm in which symbols cling, we are at their mercy unless we have been taught how to deal with them. Those who ride Kundalini without knowing their destination risk losing their way. The result may be ego inflation, which occurs when one's limited personality survives the crisis intact, and the individual then claims the luster of the archetypal world for his or her own person. Or ego deflation. If the awakening thoroughly disrupts one's self-integration and garbles one's self-image, that's that ego death. The savants of India have for thousands of years worked to perfect user-friendly methods of spiritual advancement that, when properly implemented, prepare individuals for and guide them through the process of individuation without terrorizing them. Each of these methods arouses the evolutionary power inherent in every individual, but this power appears as Kundalini in one system alone, the Tantric tradition. Anyone who wants to understand Kundalini as Kundalini must first come to grips with Tantra. Though it has for centuries been maligned by the orthodox and puritanical among Indians, Tantra is not a religion of sensory indulgence, which teaches the instant gratification of one's cravings. A good tantric believes in truth and reality, and in the facing of facts, the first of which is the fact that all of us are part of the manifested universe, subject to its laws until we develop the power to redefine ourselves in other terms. A tantric aims to become svatantra, self-functioning, to be free of all limitations, including especially the limitations of his or her own personality. Tantra is not a subject one can learn in school, nor are tantric texts how-to books, because Tantra is not bookish knowledge. It is living wisdom, which must be obtained directly from an experienced practitioner. A good guide, a guru who has already followed the path and knows all its pitfalls, is absolutely essential if one hopes to follow the tantric path and arouse Kundalini without calamity. A powerless or ignorant guru is far worse than none at all. My vape's not working. That sucks. One such expert, the Agora Vimalananda, taught me what I know of Kundalini. He is uniquely original. His uniquely original way of perceiving the world developed thanks to his awakening of his own Kundalini through a midnight ritual on a corpse. When Kundalini awakened for him, she took the form of the tantric goddess Smashantara, the goddess of the burning grounds, who enables one to cross over from the reality of life to the reality of death. Smashantara, the savioress of the cemetery, enabled Vimalananda to cross over from his ordinary consciousness into states in which he could perceive reality from a different vantage. His experiences at the time of this awakening and thereafter are recounted in my book, Agora at the Left Hand of God, which I have the playlist for on my channel. Agora summarized the paths of an Agori follows in his or her odyssey from the darkness of unexamined mundane existence into the light of the celestial realms, all the while maintaining consciousness of both. Agora is a sort of super tantra, a tantra in which all sense of limitation is removed. Agora is the path of the shadow being all those aspects of our lives that permit us to exist as individuals at the expense of other beings. We can know the light of altruism only because we have known the darkness of selfishness. Only after passing through the valley of the shadow of death do we learn how to live. Agoris are psyche explorers who go down into the blackness of their individual conceits to find their way to true freedom. Their spiritual path is no anemic sweetness and light experience. An Agori must be as hard as diamond and as soft as wax, as the situation demands. Only after the grapes of your ego attachments have been thoroughly trodden into juice can you vent the sweet wine of spiritual wisdom. Agoris play the game of life with the utmost sobriety, fully aware of the wagers staked. No means to awakening is too disgusting or frightening for them, for they worship death, the great transformer. Agora literally means non-terrifying. An Agori takes the most terrifying experiences possible and transmutes them into devotion to reality. Tradition sends Agoris to seek God in the cremation grounds, where death is ever present. But a good Agori sees the entire world as one vast, ongoing cremation. Agoris personify and deify death, selecting one face of this universal reality as their beloved, and worshipping this deity with an intense and all-consuming love. Every day for Vimalananda was a day of play with the cosmos, his lover, and he never tired of playing the games that lovers play, for those games brought him ever closer to his sweetheart. That's the real sweetheart search. The love quest. Because when the goddess Kundalini awoke in him, she had a form and a personality that he could interact with. Kundalini spared Vimalananda the sort of anguish that she awarded Pandit Gopi Krishna. Had Panditji perhaps concentrated on a god or goddess instead of a lotus, he too might have found a haven in which to rest when the tempest tossed him. To Vimalananda, Kundalini was not a wild, unapproachable force that battered him about according to her whim. She was instead his beloved mother, in whose lap he sat, allowing her to protect him from all dangers with her irresistible clout. Vimalananda always preferred the path of worship of God with form to that of worship of the impersonal absolute. To him, the highest expression of divinity is the motherhood of God, the God who protects and loves her children no matter what errors they make. This attitude was to him the best of all possible attitudes when dealing with Kundalini, because once you enter into such a mother-child relationship, all fear of damage by the energy disappears. Also, as he liked to say, Bhakti is Shakti, the energy, Shakti, that you put into devotion, Bhakti, to your chosen form of God is returned to you manyfold, benevolently amplified by the universe. As your devotion grows, so does your own personal power, which you are less likely to misuse since all you can think about is the one you love. An Agori's ache for a vision of the beloved is so fierce that no means to achieve is too extreme. This divine fury, a sort of cosmic thrill-seeking, is Agora's hallmark. Agoris always overdo a thing, as Vimalananda liked to say, and Agora documents how he frequently overdid things in his life. Overcome by his craving for his beloved, he worshipped with every element and substance and hobnobbed with every sort of ethereal being, all his rituals becoming by tantric transmutation offerings to the divine. Try that one again. All his rituals becoming, by tantric transmutation, offerings to the divine. Agora's field of activity is not limited to enthralling or repugnant practices. The path of Agora is the path of spontaneity. Every action must be performed at the moment most appropriate for its performance, and it must be appropriate to the context in which it is performed. Worship is worship to an Agori, be it in a temple or in a cemetery, with the surrender of all self-interests, except that single-minded quest to achieve the beloved. An Agori can accept with love and thankfulness everything that God offers, bliss and misery alike, and transmute every experience, even a trip to the toilet, into an act of worship of the Absolute. Everything an Agori touches, desired and despised, clean and unclean, he drags from the periphery of his experience into the purity of his center to help develop the critical mass needed to ignite and sustain a spiritual chain reaction. And that, I like to think, is true alchemy. That is, as the Freemasons say, squaring the circle, perfecting something. You're perfecting yourself, and that is your clear vision of God. Vimalananda was a man of action, both right-handed and left-handed, and cared little for scholarly views on what might or might not be classifiable as Agora. He embraced accepted doctrine when it suited his purposes, while always retaining the right to innovate at any moment when necessity demanded. Philosophical systems have come and gone in India over the ages, but the spiritual springs from which they have sprung have continued to overflow. Indian spiritual tradition, Tantra in particular, has always ebbed and flowed between the twin shores of theory and practice. Theory perpetually regulates practice, and practice inexorably modifies theory. As fast as theologians erect and legitimize mountains of dogma, iconoclasts weather them down with their own individual interpretations. The heresies of yesterday are the orthodoxies of today. Contemporary India is filled with individuals and sects working to legitimize their own unique aggregate of philosophy, cosmology, and technique by assimilating their systems to the mainstream of Vedic tradition, or Kashmir Shaivism, or whatever, while other individuals and sects, often paradoxically the same ones, move away from such standardized definitions of religion, calling them convenient fictions that limit and mislead, maintaining that modern circumstances, time, place, people, are too different to permit precise recovery or revival of the ancient ways. They assert that what must be revived within a system is the flame which gives it life, not its external form. For his part, Vimalananda cheerfully combined many seemingly contradictory theories and practices into his Agora, quoting in his support the ancient text which taught that only bewildered people dispute about truth. For what proposition is there that the learned cannot defend? Though highly educated, Vimalananda's knowledge of Sanskrit texts was modest, and he neither knew nor cared to know much of the tantric literature in Gujarati, Hindi, or English translation, languages in which he was fluent. His textbook was life itself, and he could read from it many meanings which are accessible only to those who know the secret language of spirituality. While he called himself an Agori, Vimalananda's disdain for organized religion distanced him from all recognized Agori lineages, nor did he refer to his own mentors as Agoris, and it is doubtful that they would describe themselves thus. He preferred to follow his own path. Take a moment before I quote Vimalananda on his path. I have never believed in religion. Religions are all limited because they concentrate only on one aspect of truth. That is why they are always fighting amongst one another, because they all think they are in sole possession of the truth. But I say there is no end to knowledge, so there is no use in trying to confine it to one scripture, or one holy book, or one experience. This is why I say when people ask what religion I follow, I don't believe in sampradaya, sect. I believe in sampradaha, incineration. So I don't believe in sect, I believe in incineration. Burn down everything which is getting in the way of your perception of truth. In this, at least, he agreed with Jung, who once observed that the function of religion is to protect us from an experience of God. The Agori Vimalananda was too much the iconoclast and too determined to perceive reality to be imprisoned within dogma. His Agora is a religion of consciousness, its precepts engraved not on tablets of stone, but on the heart of the individual practitioner who must use them to create an individual system, thereby carving out his or her own spiritual niche. There are not now, and there never have been, large numbers of Agoris abroad in the world, nor did Vimalananda create many. He was quick to tell people, "Do as I say, not as I do," and never permitted anyone to slavishly imitate him, because only those fit to dine on human brain will derive spiritual advantage from such a diet. He never devised any system of spiritual practices for the world to admire and follow. After carefully evaluating each individual who came to him, he would teach certain lessons directly or obliquely, or he would teach nothing at all, depending on his perception of his karmic connection with that person and his or her fitness and aptitude for spiritual disciplines. He never hesitated to challenge anyone's assumptions on spirituality and yogic discipline, and was not afraid to step on toes if he thought that he might arouse someone from their slumber by doing so. Vimalananda wanted his views to be spread to anyone willing to listen because he felt acutely the anguish of the emptiness of the modern world, whose god is Mammon, and whose predominant religion is an arrogantly emotionless science which seems bent on suppressing what humanity remains within us. A society disintegrates and meaning dissolves from life. People tend either to descend into despair or return to their roots. We in the West have for years been cutting ourselves off from our roots, and now, nearly rootless, we are slowly dying from lack of cultural nourishment. Let that one soak in for a bit. Some Westerners seek to live without roots, hydroponically, through futurism, while others try to reinvent the past via the men's movement, goddess worship, Afrocentrism, and the like. Yet others search for roots in such still living cultures as the Indian, Native American, Tibetan, or Chinese, as if perhaps by donning their visages, they can somehow assimilate their way. We have, however, become so superficial that few of us know how to dive deep enough into the cultures we seek to emulate, to tap into their roots. And so we usually, as Jung feared, poison ourselves. Vimalananda had no more faith that mass spiritual movements can save us than he trusted in social programs, political activism, or enforced morality to rescue us, since all such solutions are superficial. They change our clothing, not our inner beings. He believed that real change can come only through those individuals who were brave enough to examine all of their reality assumptions and change those which must be changed. The numerous misconceptions about spirituality which permeate our modern world make his teachings on Kundalini valuable for everyone trying to follow a spiritual path. Before his death, Vimalananda charged me with the responsibility of presenting his musings to those willing to listen, as much for the purpose of organizing my own knowledge, refining my understanding, and manifesting my own creativity, as for the purpose of instructing others. He also wanted me to have something solid to remember him by, so that whenever I want to be with him again, I need only open the book. Like other great teachers, Vimalananda had a knack for being right, as well as an outstanding ability to impart his knowledge to those around him, usually when they least expected it, via an uncommon perspective, mixing theory with anecdote, or letting anecdote reveal theory. His urbanity and ready humor betrayed a virtuosity in his play with the world, which often masked an extraordinary shrewdness. He was never shy to speak out, and at times he seemed as arrogant, harsh, critical, opinionated, pretentious, and ready with stereotypes as much as others. His words are filled as much as other words were filled with sweetness, compassion, love, devotion, farsightedness, and attention to detail. In his opinions and often peculiar views, he was unequivocal and unshakable, which earned him both fear and respect, and a reputation variously as a genius, crank, and a man of wisdom and God. Whatever else he might have been, Vimalananda was always real, always true to himself, and his vision of reality, and he encouraged anyone who couldn't stand his heat to leave his kitchen. Those who are convinced that the real is limited to that which our senses can perceive will ask, did all the events described by Vimalananda actually occur in the outward sense of our consensus reality, or did they occur solely within his individual consciousness? Better they should ask this question of themselves, for few people realize just how much of our reality is manipulated. Today's mass media daily synthesize miraculous phenomena for our amazement, and they may manipulate our emotions. Are these images real or not? With the rise of computer-generated virtual reality, soon we will literally be unable to believe our eyes and ears. Dare we rely on the objective truth of our sensory perceptions any longer? And that's all come to pass. We see the holograms. We know what they're capable of. One of the chief arguments against subjective reality is that since it has no physical substance, it is ephemeral. Oh, it makes me feel stupid. Ephemeral? This is certainly true, at least on the surface, which is where objective reality operates after all. But below the surface, it is objective reality which is found to be impermanent, while the reality of ideas, memories, and reflections goes on and on. This truth is brought home to me regularly in India, where people, when giving directions, often refer to landmarks which were demolished years before. Clearly, a structure's ethereal reality may persist long after its physical form has disappeared. Though all living beings eventually lose their physical existence, they continue to live on in the hearts of those who remember them. Some live on in memory for many generations. A few, like Jesus, will live and continue to transform human lives forever. Others, like the gods and goddesses of India, are remembered even though they may never have lived in physical bodies. Are they real? We in India believe that they are far more real than humans are, even though their existence may not be provable by methods acceptable to materialistic science. Whether these acts that Vimalananda recounts actually happened in the physical world or not is impossible to say. For India is truly a mysterious country, and strange things do happen there. Many people who knew Vimalananda experienced many unusual things when in his vicinity, and most of them attributed such occurrences to him, while he attributed them to the great goddess. I am talking as if I do these things, but in fact it is beyond me to do anything. Only Ma can do it. She does it all. This is the foundation of all my confidence in my abilities. Do I have any capabilities? Ha! Everything is from Ma. Vimalananda was an artist of consciousness, and it is enough to know that his experiences were intensely real and true to him, and that they can be real and true for anyone who is open to the possibility of their being so. Every time I reread an incident from his life, it suddenly becomes real for me again, no matter how long ago it transpired, and Vimalananda thus continues to live for me. Vimalananda was convinced by his experiments, as some modern physicists have been convinced by their experiments, that it is really impossible to speak of objective reality without taking the assistance of a subjective observer, a knower, whose observation irrevocably alters the reality thus observed. That shift in perception, which allows Aghoris to know the knower, that knower, known, and the process of knowing are one and the same. That allows them to perceive miraculous phenomenon, whether obvious to others or not. Aghoras control their thoughts and emotions themselves, that they may better enjoy the reality they so crave, the company of the beloved. Since human consciousness requires objects, this book speaks of Kundalini as if she can be considered in isolation from the individual in whom she exists. Kundalini cannot be objectified, but until she is awakened in an individual, she exists for him or her only as a concept, and so she can be relatively objectified. As she awakens, this relative objectification is progressively converted into relative subjectification, until when Kundalini has been completely aroused, one moves wholly into subjective consciousness, and descriptions lose their utility. This was one of the reasons that Vimalananda preferred to deal with people individually and never discoursed in public. When he met someone, he would use words to express the objective portion of what he had to communicate, and would express the subjective part by other means. Since each individual's consciousness is made up of a particular ratio of subjective to objective awareness, the targeted individual would often get the message, while other people in the room might miss it entirely. I have tried to select from the many objective messages directed at me over the years, those which are sufficiently general to be of use to readers who knew neither of us, and I have tried to compile them in such a way as to permit some of his subjective messages to come through as well. Vimalananda insisted on anonymity in these books because the less people know of the external details of his life, the less they will be distracted from looking at what he wants them to see, the internal details. Anonymity protects his message, the subjective story of his life, from any scholarly nitpicking over its objective details. A consummate actor, he compiled his teachings in the book of his life, in actions rather than in words, his every action a well-thought-out statement in chapters of his saga. Though he insisted on anonymity both for himself and for his mentors, the name Vimalananda is not wholly pseudonymous. Pseudonymous? Man, that word's gonna come to me fucking a half hour later and I'm gonna feel stupid. As I usually do, and this is a humbling experience to sit here and to read words that I'm too dumb to say in front of people. Granted, there's only like 6 of you in the chat. People will listen to these books. These are my most popular videos, other than fucking Chuck Schumer talking to the demon sitting in his chair in Congress. That was the real big one. But people listen to these. I'm going to sound dumb every time they listen. So the name Vimalananda is not wholly pseudonymous. He used it occasionally in his younger days. It means both son of Vimala, his mother's name was Vimala, and he whose bliss is stainless. Though all the ups and downs of his life, in days of anguish or exaltation, Vimalananda's bliss was ever stainless, because he was a true Aghori, perpetually intoxicated with love for God. As I struggled over Agora, I realized that no single angle provides a truly accurate view of Vimalananda, and so I decided to use 3 angles. In Agora, Vimalananda told his own story subjectively, presenting his life and work in his own words, much as they were spoken to me, his scribe. In this book, he appears much as I saw and objectified him. And in the 3rd volume will appear the artist that was Vimalananda, constantly at work in the atelier of the world around him. So the first book is kind of like almost like a first-person account. This one is much more from Svoboda's perspective as his student. And I don't really know what the hell that means for the 3rd book, and I can't wait to get to it. This book deals predominantly with Vimalananda's approach to the details of Tantra, as outlined in the preface to Agora, and has 3 protagonists: the teacher, Vimalananda, the taught, me, and the teaching. A majority of it is dialogue, or rather trialogue, since the teaching has its own voice. Living wisdom cannot be confined within words, but it can be hinted at through situations, much as a specific feature of an otherwise undistinguished landscape can often be discerned by following the path projected by a pointing finger. Them that have ears, let them hear, said Jesus. Whoever hears the inner import of Vimalananda's words will be able to see their inward meaning. That is the end of the introduction. I think I'm going to cut it right there. Thank you for being with me. One more thing I've got to actually share with you that's very important. I'm working on a Agora inspired t-shirt. You could say inspired. Something I would want to wear. Something I think other people would want to wear. I'd like to show you the prototype for that. I've got some more ideas after going through this. I got an idea for like a burning, smoldering background, the world being incinerated. Got ideas. Did this not work? What kind of file is this? It's bullshit. Hold on a second. I gotta pull it up. Let's just save it there. There we go. On the screen. My Agora t-shirt. We have an illustration of Vimalananda. Looks creepy as fuck, I think. Make it a little bigger. Why not? Make it a lot bigger. With Agora written in some bullshit Sanskrit underneath. I think it looks cool. I don't normally go for fonts that look like languages, but I think it's good here. And I'd like to put on the back, like, at the left hand of God or something like that. I don't know how many copyright laws I'm breaking by actually doing this. But hey, nobody watches this shit anyway, right? Yeah. I think it looks cool. Do you? Let's get that out of there. You get the idea. You get the idea. Now, I guess I'm going to fuck off. You're welcome, Red Wing. I'm glad to be reading the second book. I will be back soon for more. I feel like I should be doing something else. Oh, yeah, I got podcasts I got to edit and upload. Speaking of which, go to yakovalive.com and listen to all the podcasts. Just got back from the Gathering of the Juggalos, as everybody's well aware, and we talk a lot about that on both Mega Streamcast and Tape Eaters. Episodes aren't up yet. They'll be up probably tonight by tomorrow. yakovalive.com, everyone. And I do have a Patreon, patreon.com/yakovalive. And it's in the description. All the links are in the description. There's all sorts of ways to get in touch with me down there and all sorts of stupid crap. The Discord's a good time. We post memes. We do video and image editing. We play video games. Come hang out. And one more thing. I got one more thing I got to say. If you're like some Indian dude, and the only reason you know of me is because I've read Agora, tell the other Indians about me. Go to wherever Indians post. And I'm not trying to be insulting here. I don't know where Indians post. I don't know where y'all share your cool YouTube videos and your fresh hot YouTubers. Tell people about me.